morning, everybody, and welcome to Breakfast with an Exec. I am Kunal Mehta, Director of Product Marketing at Jitterbit, and I am your host for today. I have with me Ron Wastal. Ron is our Senior VP of Business Development, Channels and Alliances. And Ron has over 30 years of experience in the tech business, and last 15 years of which he has spent in the B2B, SaaS, tech world. And he's done a bunch of roles, in his career: sales, marketing, business development, alliances, channels. So Ron's the perfect guy to talk about customer experience. For anybody who's wondering, we are on Breakfast with an Exec, but given the global nature of our work, I'm probably sipping my last tea of the day, sitting here in Bangalore, and Ron's probably starting his first or maybe second coffee of the day. So let's start with my first question. Ron, you've been around, as I said, 30 years in this industry, and customer experience has evolved a lot, and I'm sure you've seen how that has changed. Fairly recently, what we are seeing is this whole kind of, B2C customer experience and people's expectations that they can have something similar on the B2B side, right? So how have you seen it, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, great question, Kunal. And I think what's interesting, since we all get to be a customer and we all get to have an experience with a variety of companies, we all kind of relate to the customer experience space from a consumer standpoint first, right? So I think a lot of us over the last 10, 15 years have realized how much the consumer experience has changed and become online, right? That some people call it the Amazon effect, right? So most of us, if not all, have shopped on Amazon, been able to find items very quickly, look through our reviews, ordered our whatever we're ordering, and be able to see it show up with 24 to 48 hours, right? And all those, the demand chain and the supply chain effects of all that is all kind of hidden from us. And the simplicity of that experience is very interesting to a lot of us that are thinking, how do we do that in B2B, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. How much will the market evolve in a B2B world as it's evolved in a B2C world? And I think we're at the early stages, in baseball terms, maybe it's inning 2 of a 9-inning game, where we're starting to really think about what things should be sold online versus what things really need to be sold through a direct sales organization still. How do you market, not just directly to who you're going after, but potentially marketing through other people's marketplaces, right? Mm-hmm. And advertising and trying to drive demand through other people's marketplaces, not just your own. And so I think we're in this interesting period of, depending on the maturity of the country, the maturity of the consumer, the maturity of the industries that are involved in those markets, and then, finally, even the maturity of the company itself. Where are you in this path of really trying to create potentially an omni-channel or a multi-channel experience across both, your direct model and your indirect model through other marketplaces?
I think the other interesting thing, Ron, which has emerged is this whole kind of, evolution of everything as a service or a subscription economy, right? So you're no longer basically buying products, you're probably trying it out and then making a commitment up to a certain time. So again, that obviously has an impact on how you treat your customers and what you basically put in front of them to make sure they're enticed enough to buy it. So again, what have you seen in this space?
Yeah, I think what's happening as things are moving more and more digital, as the term is said, software is eating the world. A lot of things are becoming part of a digital experience. And then people are starting to move from buy to try to rent to enhancements. And I think what that's doing is it's applying a pressure to all of us in the business to think about how often can we enhance and make that experience better. You never have kind of a stagnant product anymore. You always have this, evolution of your product, always evolving and improving through subscription economies. And what I've watch fascinating is that, in the on-premise world, we used to update things maybe 2 times every 4 years, right? Then we went to the first SaaS kind of versions and they would do it annually, right? And the next SaaS versions were doing it seasonally, right? And now you see monthly, right? Subscriptions and changes going on. And now I think people are even trying to do it, weekly. And, you see these Sunday night maintenance updates and things like that. So you can see the time shrink happening between the evolution of your product now going faster and faster to improve whatever you've done the week before. And so I think the subscription economy is really driving us all to move faster on how we're going to improve our products over our competition.
I think you mentioned this whole Amazon effect of, kind of B2B expectations becoming similar to what B2C is delivering, right? And I think there's also this merging of what I call commerce experience with the larger customer experience, right? I mean, I think it's almost as if commerce experience is now part of a customer experience cycle that that we've typically defined. So how are you seeing that play out?
Yeah, if you think, once again, let's go back to the Amazon effect and my wife or I ordering online one thing and it's showing up at your door, 24 or 48 hours later. And then let's think about that in B2B when you're buying potentially something that's supposed to last 3 to 10 years, right? And what you find is why B2B tends to be so much more complicated is, one, the dollar amounts are bigger that you're making decisions on. 2, you typically have multiple people in the decision-making process of deciding it. And then, 3, it's not like you open the package and you start using it immediately. You could take 3 to 6 months to get the project live, and then it's got 3 to 5 years to roll out, and then you've got a number of things. So the difference between the purchase and the post-sales experience is just dramatically different in B2B selling versus B2C, right? So I think what a lot of us are trying to figure out is, depending on the size of your company in B2B, you could only be 5 to 10 people selling something, and it maybe isn't that big a difference from a consumer experience, depending on the product line you offer. But you can imagine as you get to 100 employees, 1,000 employees, 10,000, 100,000, coordination across the number of departments you have. I think Jitterbit has 20 different departments, and we're, a fairly medium-sized company. But companies have 500. Well, you're coordinating that customer experience across all those departments and trying to hyper-automate that experience so it doesn't feel like you're going across 20 to 50 departments as you're going through the life cycle of buying and implementing a B2B technology, right? Or something like that. So I think it's interesting how the evolution, and you have to think through the complexity of a B2B sales cycle and delivery cycle versus a B2C cycle. And that, I think we're just now getting into, how do you coordinate a much more complex buying and delivery cycle in the B2B world?
So you talked about, if I'm a company, how do I kind of, hyper automate across multiple departments so that customer doesn't feel as if he's interacting with, kind of different departments. He just sees this one seamless customer experience. But on the other side, if I am that company who's trying to do some of this, how do I activate it? Like, what is my first step? Do I go big bang? Do I do one step at a time? How have you seen some of the customers that we kind of, talk to every day activate some of this?
Yep. So the way we kind of look at it is, some people do big bang, right? So they do large application rollouts, and a lot of times that can drive a lot of change inside the company. But like any large project, you've kind of got to break it down and think about what is core and critical to get quick wins going and start to show success, so you can keep the momentum of a large rollout or a project. And so I tend to think of it as kind of maybe 4 stages of a customer journey, right? Stage 1 is really around the awareness stage and thinking through the consideration. So if the customer's going through an awareness to consideration process, how do we operate inside of that? How do we make that the best experience possible? And so I think things like how does the customer discover us, capture, how do we attribute it? How do we route, to the right channels and things like that? So you kind of think through the first couple stages. The second stage is really consideration to purchase. How are we doing in that process? What is the key areas that we need to think about as we integrate around qualifying, enhancing, and proposing different solutions to that client across these different marketplaces? And then final thing is really purchase to retention. How do we solve that process of not only they purchase it, but they're going to renew and ideally expand and use those offerings that we had that we put inside the proposal itself. And so I think what people are doing is kind of breaking those life cycles down and thinking through what are the hops that we have to take between departments, between people, when the customer's experiencing that, and how do we coordinate that? And then where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? The one we think a lot of the integration and automation market has been focused on for a while is that whole lead to revenue process. Right. And how do we make that a really good experience? And then in the commerce piece of that, how does that, whether you're online or offline, that experience of commerce from order to fulfillment feel very efficient, effective as the coordination happens across different groups inside the company.
Right. I think if I, as a customer, right, if I'm trying to do this, sometimes you obviously have this one vendor who's probably providing a bunch of these solutions, versus sometimes I might have best of breed for certain functions, right? And I know a lot of times people kind of assume that if you have one vendor across, everything is just seamless, but we know that's not the case, right? I mean, it's on paper, yes, it might look like that, but reality is obviously far from it. So this whole best of breed versus one homogeneous system, any differences that you would see or suggest to customers in terms of how do you attack one versus the other?
Yeah, so I think, the suites versus best of breed story has been around in the tech industry for a very long time. I think one of the reasons ecosystems is getting such a popular term inside the industry now is I think it's trying to accomplish both through its thought process, right? So it tends to have a super node or a master node that's coordinating the network, but the ecosystem is made up not just of one company anymore, right? SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, some of the largest ecosystems in the world have thousands of partners, right? That they work with, both technology and consulting partners that they're coordinating around that super node. And so what I think it's doing is it's trying to apply best of breed expertise around, a key super node area that, let's say it's CRM or ERP or something like that, is applied to come in and help execute. But it all doesn't have to be in one company more, because it turned out even in the large companies, they had to have special pockets of expertise to build it out as well. And I think what's happening is larger companies are realizing they might move faster with partners than they do trying to hire and put everybody in place around that. So ecosystems are forming to execute different markets effectively. So you'll have your partners in country, your partners in region, and your partners in certain size of companies, SMB, mid-market enterprise, that you can apply to help execute around, let's say, these super node application areas and things like that.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you so much, Ron, for your time today. I think this was great. I definitely found it useful, and I'm sure our listeners will find it useful as well. And thank you so much for listening, and we will be back soon with more interesting topics. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron.